Welcome back to the Whispering Tome. If you are new here, this is a place for stories that history forgot to tell, not the tales of emperors and conquests that fill the textbooks, but the quieter stories, the human stories, the ones that happened in the spaces between the great events. You are listening to Episode 4 of The Silk Road, a merchant's silent epic. Let me tell you where we have been. Tahir left Kashgar as a boy of 22 who had never traveled beyond his city's walls. His father, a former merchant crippled by the road, sent him east to save their family from ruin. He crossed the Taklamakan desert, the Sea of Death. He survived a sandstorm that swallowed the sky. He endured 3 days without water. He discovered that he was stronger than he knew. He reached China, Dunhuang, the gateway to the east. He learned the art of negotiation. He made his first trades. He stood in caves carved by 700 years of pilgrims and felt connected to something larger than himself. He returned to Kashgar, to his father, to his sister, changed in ways they could see written on his face. And now, after 2 weeks of rest and preparation, he stands at the foot of the Pamir Mountains. The roof of the world. The final barrier between him and Samarkand. The desert tested his endurance. The mountains will test something else entirely. His ability to keep moving when his body begs him to stop. His ability to think clearly when his brain is starved of oxygen. His ability to survive cold that seeps into the bones and refuses to leave. This is the crossing that kills 1 in 5 who attempt it. This is where we find out what Tahir is truly made of.
The Pamir Mountains have many names. The Persians called them the roof of the world, a name that stuck because it was simply true. These peaks rise higher than almost any other mountains on Earth, higher than the Alps, higher than the Rockies, second only to the Himalayas, which lie far to the south. The Chinese called them the Onion Mountains because wild onions grew in the valleys below the snow line, a practical name for a practical people. The locals who lived in the high valleys called them Bamai Dunya, the same meaning as the Persian, the roof of the world. But the Silk Road merchants who had to cross them called them something else. The Mountains of Death. Not because the mountains were evil, not because demons lived in the peaks, though some believed they did, but simply because the mountains did not care. They did not care if you were rich or poor, young or old, experienced or naive. They killed without malice and without mercy. They killed because that is what mountains do to those who are not prepared. And sometimes, they killed those who were prepared anyway. This was the challenge that Tahir now faced. The caravan left Kashgar on a morning in early winter. The timing was deliberate. Too early in the season, and the passes would still be blocked by the previous winter's snow. Too late, and the new winter's storms would catch them on the high ground. There was a window of perhaps 6 weeks when the crossing was possible. Miss that window, and you either turned back or died trying. Yusuf had timed their journey perfectly. They would reach the highest passes in the middle of the safe window, assuming, of course, that the weather cooperated. The weather rarely cooperated. As the caravan wound out of Kashgar's western gate, Tahir looked back one last time. His father was not there. They had said their goodbyes that morning in the courtyard of their home. Mahmud had held his son for a long time, longer than necessary, as if memorizing the feel of him. The mountains are worse than the desert, Mahmud had said. I lost my leg in those passes. I lost friends, good men who did everything right and still died. I know, father. You cannot know, not until you are there. Not until the air refuses to fill your lungs and the cold seeps into places you did not know you had. He had gripped Tahir's shoulders with surprising strength for an old man. But you will survive. You must survive. Promise me. I promise, father. Swear it on your mother's memory. Tahir had felt the weight of that request. His mother, dead these 10 years. The woman whose absence had shaped their family in ways they were still discovering. I swear it on her memory. I will come home. Mahmud had nodded, released him, turned away before Tahir could see the tears he knew were forming. Now, watching Kashgar shrink behind him, Tahir touched the silver ring on his finger. His grandfather's ring, His father's ring, his ring now. Come home. He intended to. The first week of travel was almost pleasant. The terrain rose gradually as they moved west, but the slopes were gentle and the weather mild. They passed through valleys where farmers grew wheat and barley, where sheep grazed on brown hillsides, where villages of mud brick houses clustered around ancient wells. This was still inhabited country, still safe, still familiar in its way. The caravan moved slower than it had in the desert. The camels were carrying full loads of silk and porcelain and tea, and the rising terrain made every step harder than it had been on flat ground. They made perhaps 15 miles a day, sometimes less. But Tahir did not mind the slower pace. He used the time to prepare himself mentally for what lay ahead. He talked with the older merchants who had made this crossing before. He listened to their stories, their warnings, their advice. "The altitude is the worst," said Ibrahim, the old healer. "You will feel it before you see it. Headaches at first, then shortness of breath, then confusion. If you start seeing things that are not there, you have gone too high too fast. You must descend immediately or you will die." "How do you know when you have gone too high?" Tahir asked. Ibrahim shrugged. "You do not. That is the problem. The mountains give no warning. One moment you are fine. The next moment you are dying. The only defense is to climb slowly, to give your body time to adjust, to rest when your lungs tell you to rest, not when your schedule tells you to rest." Chen Wei had different advice. "The cold is the true enemy," he said. "The altitude will make you stupid, but the cold will kill you. Keep moving. Never stop moving unless you are in shelter. The moment you stop, the cold begins to win." "What about shelter? Are there caravanserais in the mountains?" Chen Wei laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Caravanserais? No, there are caves sometimes, overhangs, places where previous travelers have built rough walls against the wind. You will learn to spot them, to race toward them when the weather turns. But there are stretches of the high passes where there is no shelter at all. On those stretches, you either keep moving or you freeze where you stand." Tahir absorbed this information, stored it away, tried not to let the fear show on his face. The foothills began on the 8th day. The gentle slopes gave way to steeper terrain. The valleys narrowed. The villages grew smaller and further apart, and for the first time, Tahir saw the true mountains. They appeared in the distance like a wall, a barrier stretching from horizon to horizon, blocking out the sky. White peaks gleaming in the morning sun, so high that they seemed to belong to a different world entirely. He had seen mountains before. The ranges around Kashgar were visible on clear days, snow-capped and distant, but those were foothills compared to what he saw now. These mountains were a different order of magnitude. They rose and kept rising until they disappeared into clouds. Their scale was difficult to comprehend, difficult to believe. And somewhere in that wall of stone and ice, invisible from this distance, was the pass they would have to cross. 15,000 feet, Yusuf said, appearing beside him. "Maybe higher. The pass itself is called the Torugart. It has been used for 1,000 years, maybe longer." "It does not look like anything could cross that," Tahir said. "It does not, does it?" Yusuf smiled grimly. "And yet people do, every year, some of them even survive." It was not reassuring. But then, Yusuf had never been one for false comfort. The altitude sickness began on the 12th day. Tahir had been warned about it, had been told what to expect, but the reality was different from the description. It started as a headache, dull at first, a pressure behind his eyes that he attributed to the brightness of the sun on snow. But by mid-afternoon, the pressure had become pain, a throbbing ache that made thinking difficult. Then came the shortness of breath. At first, he thought he was simply out of shape. The slope was steep, after all. The thin air was harder to breathe than the thick air of the lowlands. But as the day wore on, the sensation grew worse. Every breath felt incomplete, as if his lungs could not quite fill, as if the air itself had become inadequate. He stopped to rest more often than he should have, stood with his hands on his knees, gasping, watching the other merchants pass him by. Some of them looked as bad as he felt. Others seemed unaffected. "Keep moving," Chen Wei said, pausing beside him. "The worst thing you can do is stop." "I cannot breathe." "You can breathe. You are breathing. It simply feels like you cannot. Your body is lying to you. Tell it to be quiet and keep moving." Tahir forced himself to walk. One step, another. The headache pounded with each heartbeat. His lungs burned with each breath, but he kept moving. Because Chen Wei was right. Stopping meant dying. The only way out was through. The nights were worse. At altitude, the cold descended with the sun. Within an hour of sunset, the temperature dropped below freezing. Within 2 hours, it dropped further. By midnight, the cold was a physical force, pressing against the tents, seeping through the blankets, finding every gap in Tahir's clothing and exploiting it mercilessly. He slept in all his clothes, every layer he owned. He shared a tent with 3 other merchants, their bodies huddled together for warmth. He pulled the blankets over his head and breathed into the small space, trying to warm the air with his own breath. And still he shivered. The fire they built for cooking did little to help. At this altitude, wood burned poorly. The flames were small and pale, producing more smoke than heat. The food they cooked was half raw, the water never quite boiling. Ibrahim had explained the science. Something about air pressure and the temperature at which water changed from liquid to gas. Tahir had not fully understood. He only knew that nothing worked the way it should. And the nights lasted forever. He would lie awake for hours, too cold to sleep, too exhausted to do anything else. His mind would wander to dark places, to the merchants who had died on this crossing, to the stories of frozen bodies found in the spring, preserved by the cold, their faces still twisted in their final expressions. He would think about his father, his sister, his home. He would wonder if he would ever see them again. And then, eventually, exhausted, he would sleep, and wake a few hours later to find ice in his beard and his fingers numb inside his gloves. The blizzard came on the 16th day. They had been warned it might. The sky had been gray all morning, heavy with clouds that seemed to press down from above. The wind had picked up, carrying ice crystals that stung exposed skin. Yusuf had pushed the pace, trying to reach the high pass before the weather broke. He had not pushed hard enough. The storm hit them 3 hours before they reached the shelter they were aiming for. One moment, the visibility was perhaps 100 yards. The next, it was nothing. The world disappeared into swirling white. The wind hit like a physical blow. Tahir staggered, nearly fell, caught himself on his camel's harness. The animal groaned in protest, lowering its head against the gale. Around him, he could hear shouts, but he could see nothing. The snow was everywhere, in his eyes, in his nose, in his mouth when he tried to call out. "Stay together," Yusuf's voice somewhere ahead. "Hold the ropes, do not let go of the ropes." The caravan had prepared for this. They had linked themselves together with ropes, camel to camel, merchant to merchant, a chain that could not be broken by the wind, in theory. Tahir found his rope, gripped it with both hands, felt the tug of the person ahead, the drag of the person behind. They were still connected, still a caravan. But they were not moving. "Forward," Yusuf shouted. "We must keep moving." The camels did not want to move. They wanted to stop, to kneel, to huddle against the wind and wait for the storm to pass. It took all of Tahir's strength to pull his lead camel forward, to force it to take one step, then another. The wind screamed. The snow blinded. The cold bit through every layer of clothing and found the warmth beneath, stealing it breath by breath. Tahir lost track of time, lost track of distance. There was only the rope in his hands and the need to keep moving. Step by step, breath by burning breath, the world had shrunk to this one simple task: do not stop, do not let go, do not die. He did not know how long the march lasted. Hours, perhaps. It felt like days. And then, suddenly, there was a wall. Not a rock wall, not a mountain face. A built wall. Stone and mud, ancient and crumbling, but real, solid, a shelter. The caravan poured through a gap in the wall and into a space that was, if not warm, at least protected from the wind. The snow could not reach them here. The screaming gale was reduced to a distant howl. Tahir collapsed against his camel's flank. He was shaking uncontrollably. His hands were numb. His face was numb. He could not feel his feet. But he was alive. Around him, the other merchants were in similar states. Huddled shapes, covered in snow, trembling with cold and exhaustion. The camels knelt gratefully, pressing together for warmth. Yusuf was moving through the group, checking on each person, counting heads, making sure everyone had made it. Tahir watched him work, watched the systematic efficiency of a man who had done this many times before. And then he saw Yusuf stop, saw his face change, saw him turn and push back out into the storm without a word. The merchant's name was Hassan. He was young, perhaps 30, a trader from Bukhara making his first crossing of the Pamirs. Tahir had not known him well. They had exchanged perhaps a dozen words during the entire journey. But he remembered Hassan's face, eager, excited, a man at the beginning of what he hoped would be a profitable career on the Silk Road. They found him 50 yards from the shelter. He had let go of the rope. No one knew why. Perhaps his hands had grown too numb to grip. Perhaps the wind had torn it from his grasp. Perhaps he had simply become confused, disoriented by the altitude and the cold and the blinding snow. Whatever the reason, he had wandered off the path, walked in circles, the snow covering his tracks almost as fast as he made them. And then he had stopped. By the time Yusuf found him, he was already dead, frozen where he fell, his face peaceful, almost serene, as if he had simply decided to lie down and rest. The cold killed like that, the others said. It was not painful at the end. The body grew numb, the mind grew confused, and eventually you simply stopped. Stopped shivering, stopped struggling, stopped living. They could not bury him. The ground was frozen solid, and they had no tools that could break through. Instead, they covered his body with stones. A cairn to mark where he had fallen. A monument that the spring thaw would eventually erase. Yusuf said a few words, prayers in Arabic that Tahir only half understood. Then they moved on. Because they had to, because the storm was still raging, because staying meant more deaths. Tahir walked away from the cairn with a new weight in his chest, a weight that had nothing to do with the thin air. Hassan had done everything right. He had prepared. He had trained. He had joined a reputable caravan with an experienced master. And he had died anyway. Because the mountains did not care about preparation, did not care about experience, did not care about anything at all. They simply killed. The storm lasted 2 more days. The caravan sheltered in the ancient way station, huddled together for warmth, rationing their food and fuel. The camels grew restless and thin. The merchants grew quiet and introspective. Tahir spent the time thinking about Hassan, about the randomness of it, the unfairness. One moment, a man with dreams and plans and a future. The next, a frozen corpse beneath a pile of stones. It could have been him, could have been any of them. The only difference between the living and the dead was luck. Luck that their grip on the rope had held. Luck that the wind had not pushed them off the path. Luck that their bodies had not simply decided to give up. It was a sobering thought, one that Tahir would carry with him for the rest of his life. On the 3rd day, the storm broke. The wind died, the clouds parted, and for the first time in days, Tahir saw the sun. It was blinding. The snow that covered everything reflected the light with painful intensity. Tahir had to squint just to see, and even then, his eyes watered constantly. But he could see, and what he saw took his breath away. The pass lay before them, a gap in the mountain wall, flanked by peaks that rose thousands of feet above. The path was narrow, barely wide enough for 2 camels to walk abreast. On one side, a wall of rock. On the other, a drop that seemed to go down forever. And at the highest point of the pass, a pile of stones. Prayer flags fluttering in the wind. Offerings left by generations of travelers who had made it this far and survived. The Torugart Pass, Yusuf said quietly. 15,500 feet, the highest point of our journey. Tahir stared at the pass, at the impossibly thin path, at the deadly drop. We have to cross that. Yes. It looks like a ribbon stretched across the sky. It is, but it has held for 1,000 years. It will hold for us. Tahir was not sure he believed that, but there was no other choice. Forward, always forward. The crossing of the pass took 3 hours. 3 hours of careful steps on a path covered with ice. 3 hours of keeping his eyes forward, never looking down at the abyss that yawned beside him. 3 hours of leading his terrified camels along a ledge that seemed designed by cruel gods to test the limits of human courage. There were moments when Tahir was certain he would fall, when the wind gusted and his footing slipped and his heart stopped in his chest, when a camel in front of him stumbled and he waited for the scream of man and beast tumbling into the void. But the falls never came. The stumbles were recovered. The gusts passed. And then, suddenly, they were through. The path widened. The drop receded. The ground leveled out into a broad plateau covered in snow. Tahir stopped and looked back at the pass they had just crossed. From this side, it looked even more impossible, a knife edge of stone against the sky. They had done it. They had crossed the roof of the world. He wanted to cheer, to shout, to celebrate. But all he could do was stand there, breathing the thin air, feeling the cold wind on his face, and acknowledge quietly that he was still alive. The descent began immediately. After the high pass, every step was a step downward, a step toward thicker air and warmer temperatures, a step toward survival. The change was not immediate. The first day of descent, Tahir felt as wretched as ever. His headache persisted. His lungs still burned. His body still ached from the cold and the exertion. But on the second day, something shifted. He noticed it in small ways at first. He could breathe a little easier. His thoughts were a little clearer. The constant pressure behind his eyes had begun to ease. By the third day, he felt almost human again. The landscape changed with the altitude. The barren rock and ice gave way to scrubby vegetation. The scrub gave way to grass. The grass grew thicker and greener as they descended further. And then, on the 5th day after the pass, Tahir saw trees. Actual trees. Not the twisted shrubs of the high valleys, but real trees with trunks and branches and leaves that rustled in the wind. The sight of them almost made him weep. They were descending into a different world. A world of life and color and warmth. A world that felt, after the nightmare of the mountains, like paradise. On the 7th day after the pass, Yusuf called the caravan to a halt. They had stopped on a ridge overlooking a vast valley. The valley stretched from horizon to horizon, golden in the afternoon sun. Rivers wound through it like silver ribbons. Fields covered the valley floor, green and brown in patterns that spoke of cultivation. And in the center of the valley, still many miles away, a city. Even from this distance, Tahir could see that it was enormous, far larger than Kashgar, far larger than Dunhuang. It sprawled across the valley floor like a living thing, its edges blurred by distance and dust. But what caught his eye, what made his breath stop in his chest, was what rose above the city. Domes, blue domes, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, catching the afternoon light and glowing like sapphires scattered across the earth. Samarkand, Yusuf said. The word hung in the air like a prayer. Samarkand, the city of blue domes, the jewel of the Silk Road, the destination that had driven Tahir from his home and across half the world. He had heard the name spoken 1,000 times, had dreamed of it during the endless days in the desert, had wondered if he would ever actually see it. And now it lay before him, real, tangible, waiting. The journey was almost over. The caravan descended into the valley over the next 2 days. The terrain grew easier with every mile. The air grew warmer. The vegetation grew lusher. By the time they reached the valley floor, they were walking through orchards heavy with fruit and fields golden with grain. This was the Fergana Valley, one of the most fertile regions on Earth, the breadbasket of Central Asia. Armies had fought over this valley for millennia. Empires had risen and fallen for control of its wealth. And at its heart sat Samarkand. The city grew larger as they approached. The domes resolved from distant shapes into actual structures. Tahir could see minarets now, towers, walls of brick and stone painted in patterns of blue and white and gold. The road they followed merged with other roads, other caravans, other travelers. The traffic grew thicker as they approached the city. Merchants from China and Persia, warriors from the steppes, scholars and pilgrims and craftsmen from every corner of the known world. All of them flowing toward the same destination. All of them drawn by the same gravity. Samarkand. They entered the city through the eastern gate on a morning in late winter. The gate was enormous, 30 feet high at least, flanked by towers of blue tile that shimmered in the morning sun. Guards stood watch, but they barely glanced at the caravan as it passed. This was Samarkand. Caravans came and went constantly. They were as common as breathing. Inside the walls, Tahir found himself in a world unlike anything he had ever imagined. The streets were wide and paved with stone. Buildings rose on either side, 3 and 4 stories tall, decorated with tiles in patterns of impossible complexity. Domes loomed overhead wherever he looked, their blue surfaces catching the light and throwing it back in shades of azure and sapphire and turquoise. And the people, my God, the people. Tahir had thought Dunhuang was diverse, but Dunhuang was a crossroads town, a place people passed through. Samarkand was different. Samarkand was a destination, a city where people came to stay, to build, to create. Generations of the world's most skilled craftsmen had settled here, bringing their techniques and traditions. Generations of scholars had established schools and libraries. Generations of merchants had built trading houses and warehouses. The result was a city that felt like a living encyclopedia of human achievement. Tahir saw Chinese silk merchants and Persian carpet dealers. He saw Indian spice traders and European furriers. He saw African slaves and Turkish soldiers and Mongol administrators. He saw buildings that combined architectural styles from a dozen different civilizations, creating something new and uniquely beautiful. This was what the Silk Road was for. Not just the movement of goods, but the mixing of peoples, the exchange of ideas, the creation of something greater than any single culture could produce alone. Tahir had traveled for 8 months to reach this place. He had survived desert and mountain. He had watched a man die. He had faced his own death more times than he could count. And standing here, in the heart of Samarkand, watching the morning light play across the blue domes, he knew that it had been worth it. Every step, every struggle, every moment of fear and pain and doubt. Worth it. He was home. Not his birth home, not the home he had left behind, but home nonetheless. The home he had earned. The caravan made its way to a caravanserai in the merchant quarter. It was the largest Tahir had ever seen. A vast complex of courtyards and warehouses and stables, capable of housing a dozen caravans simultaneously. The walls were decorated with the same blue tiles that adorned the rest of the city. Fountains burbled in the central courtyard. Servants rushed to attend to the arriving merchants. Yusuf negotiated with the manager. Coins changed hands, and within an hour the camels were unloaded and the goods were secured in warehouses. The journey was over. 8 months of travel, thousands of miles, countless dangers. And now, finally, they had arrived. Tahir stood in the courtyard of the caravanserai, looking up at the sky. It was blue, clear, peaceful. He thought about his father, waiting in Kashgar, wondering if his son was alive. He thought about Hassan, buried beneath stones on a frozen mountainside. He thought about all the moments that could have ended differently. The sandstorm that could have killed him, the waterless days that could have broken him, the blizzard that could have swallowed him. He had survived them all. Not through skill alone, not through strength alone, but through luck and help and the simple, stubborn refusal to give up. He touched the ring on his finger. I promised you I would come home, Father. And I will. But first, there was business to conduct. Silk to sell, porcelain to unload, profits to count. And then, when his packs were empty and his purse was full, he would turn around and begin the long journey back. Back through the mountains, Back through the desert, back to Kashgar. Back to the father who was waiting. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Today, Tahir would rest. He would explore this city of wonders. He would let himself feel, for just a moment, the pride and relief of having made it. 8 months ago, he had been a boy who had never left his hometown. Now he was a Silk Road merchant, tested and proven, forged by desert and mountain into something harder than he had been. He looked out at the blue domes of Samarkand, glowing in the afternoon sun. And he smiled.
And so Tahir stands in Samarkand, the city of his dreams, the destination that has driven him across half the world, the place where his journey ends. Or does it? Because a merchant's journey never truly ends. There is always another route to travel, another market to explore, another fortune to be made. Tahir has proven himself on the Silk Road. He has crossed the Taklamakan desert twice. He has walked the streets of Dunhuang and seen the caves of 1,000 Buddhas. He has survived the Pamir Mountains, the roof of the world, where better men than him have died. He has earned his place among the merchants who walk these ancient roads. But the road is not finished with him yet. In our final episode, Tahir will sell his goods in the greatest bazaars of the medieval world. He will discover just how much profit 8 months of suffering can bring. He will face one last choice that will determine the kind of merchant he will become. And then he will begin the long journey home. To his father, to his sister, to the life that is waiting for him in Kashgar. Will the profits be enough to save his family from ruin? Will Tahir return as the savior his father hoped for? And what kind of man will he be when this journey is finally, truly over? These questions will be answered in Episode 5, City of Blue Domes. The final episode. If you have followed Tahir this far, subscribe and turn on notifications. The end of the journey is coming, and I promise it will be worth the wait. And if this story has meant something to you, share it with someone else, someone who might appreciate a whisper from the past. Leave a comment and tell me what you thought of the mountain crossing. Was it harder to watch than the desert? What moment hit you the hardest? Until next time, take care of yourself. And remember, the road does not forgive ignorance, but it does reward those who keep walking. This has been the Whispering Tome. One more episode. The journey continues.
And so the story comes to rest for now. Thank you for wandering through history with me. If you'd like to hear more quiet journeys like this, you're always welcome to stay. Listen and return when the night feels calm again.